please welcome Kit Zauhar and Zane Pais. Is that how to pronounce your last name? And Nina Menkes.
Congratulations on your film. Amazing performances, really incredible. I thought I'd start with a few questions and then we'll open it up to everybody. One of the things we talked earlier about was, portrayal of women normally meaning traditionally. And the way that you approach, in this case, very interestingly, yourself. You're both an actor and director. I want to talk about that more later, but how did you think about, both in this film and in your previous film, which I feel is a little different on that level, but in terms of portraying the sexuality of the main character, which is you, and your cinematic approach to doing that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, something I thought about a lot when I started making movies is just that, so when I went to NYU, where people were sort of like pretending to be adults before we were in a lot of ways, like I would see 20, 21-year-old film students asking like grown actors and actresses to like be naked and shoot these sex scenes without intimacy coordinator, without any without really any idea how to show sex, I think, cinematically. And it felt like this really like gross, weird, exploitative thing where it was like sex to seem adult, sex to seem elegant, sex to seem artsy. And I think sex and intimacy are things I'm really interested in work and in various capacities. But I think to sort of to create trust, I think I wanted to put myself out there before anyone else in some ways, to show that like what I'm doing is important to me, not to exploit anyone, but because it is narratively essential to show sex or to show sexuality. And I think by showing how important I felt it was, by putting myself sort of on the front lines, it created a lot of trust. And it made it seem less about sex as something sexy and sex as, again, like narratively important to the work.
Mm-hmm. In terms of like the way that women are normally objectified, I think you've done a really interesting job of avoiding that and making yourself into a sexual subject within the frame. And it seems also connected to the way it's photographed, and I'm wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think sex is pretty like gross unless you're having it or like you're like interested in watching it. Like sex is like a visual thing is like pretty weird and uncomfortable, and I've always like liked leaning into that. And I think a director I've been thinking about a lot right now is Catherine Brie, obviously with like Last Summer coming out, and even with like her first feature, A Real Young Woman, I think is the translation. Like it's really about like how sex is actually intrinsically tied to like ideas of disgust and fixations, and like as much about like also self-hatred as self-satisfaction. Like these are all sort of tangled up, and I think like one way that I've tried and experimented with sort of showing that is by doing like the long take, I think. I think like one way sex can become really sexy is if there's an orchestration to even the editing process of it, because then you're able to cut out all the like awkward moments in between. But really what's amazing about sex scenes, in my opinion, is seeing all those like weird moments and becoming privy to it and being forced to be privy to it. I think that eliminates a lot of the like sexiness of it, or like the sexiness as we see sex portrayed as like in a more quote unquote pornographic way.
Right,
Yeah.
Because to me, this was sort of like a horror film.
Yeah, totally.
captures actual people like you do. And in this one, you obviously are in it very centrally. This one, there's sort of more than one character who's central. Actual people, you're really the numero uno person all the time. And you're a director. And I'm really curious about that because I'm a director and I always felt like being a director was in a way antithetical to being an actor. Like that it's such a different place mentally for me. And you've done an incredible job of directing and acting, and I'm just really curious how you navigate that and how you, like, can you just talk about that double role?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I think, well, I grew up with a theater background, so acting was something I always liked doing, and I felt like it really fortified me as a director, because I think by acting I was able to increase the vocabulary through which I talk to other actors. Receiving a lot of bad direction as an actor propels you to want to be a better director, I think, also, and really like hone in on language and being concise and true. I think like a lot of times I think direction is like simpler than it is. I think that's like the big lesson I learned from acting is like direction is actually simpler than it is. Than like some people try to make it, or like the simpler it is, it's like more, and the more concise it can be, the more the actor actually has to play with sometimes. I mean, I think, and also maybe Zane can talk to the process a little bit of like what it was like acting on set together. But I think for me, like also, Zane's heard this anecdote before, but like, I think like how I think about sort of acting as a director is like, it's a little mystical. Like there's this game that I used to play in theater camp, and everyone would put their heads down in a circle, and you would just try to each like randomly count as high the numbers you could, and basically you would like sense this like spirit come over you. I don't remember what the right word was, but like you feel this like coursing of energy through you, and that's when you knew it was your turn to say your number. And everyone could really feel it. And I remember feeling it really powerfully in me when it was my turn to say a number. And it's like, it's just random. It's just this like random ball of energy kind of like bouncing around people. And when you didn't feel it and you tried to say your number, someone else would also say the number because it was their turn, but you were trying to claim that energy when it wasn't yours. And I think that's like a lot of my intuition is just like, I think we all kind of knew when it was gonna be a good take because we like felt the energy. And when we didn't feel it, like we would all say like basically right after the take would be like, that was not it, we gotta go again. And when we all did feel it, I feel like everyone did feel it because it's just this like, it's this, and yeah, it's energy in the room, it's this fullness, this feeling of fullness, of completion in some ways, I think, yeah.
Yeah, maybe Zane, you want to talk about how it felt to be directed by Kit?
Yeah, it was lovely. It was fantastic. I think it's interesting, you know, I think for pretty much every scene that I have is with Kit. So, you know, acting with the director, I think Kit's also such a natural actor that, you know, the way that the scenes would go, I think that she was probably, you know, directing me without even having to speak anything other than the lines, because, you know, whatever energy Kit is giving, I think is very much intuitively the right energy for that scene. You know, and I think that, like, just, that's kind of how I think we started approaching these scenes, and then it was tweaking from there. But I think also, you know, it's like what you said, I think when you're an actor and a director is giving you like so many notes, that can be kind of confusing and detract from, you know, coming up with things on your own. And I think that like it just fostered an environment that was, everyone really felt comfortable and safe to do whatever felt right within your parameters of the scene, and then just going forward, you kind of like hone it down. So yeah, it was lovely.
And how did you approach like framing your shots because you're in the scene?
Well, we set up like our rules, right? So the camera's always on sticks. It only moves ever, intentionally. I looked at a lot of like photographs. I thought those, like looking at like Reneke de Dijkstra was a big photographer I looked at a lot, as well as Helen van Veen, who's a Dutch photographer, and they're both also very interested in the study of just like women in beams of light, essentially, as both of them. And I was just thinking a lot about like how instead of like framing a shot, more just like shooting a picture almost of a moment, I guess. And that was helpful. I mean, Kayla Hoff, unfortunately, couldn't be here, but she's an amazing cinematographer here in LA, and she was also, I think we just understood how to cohesively put together our intentions. I think also it was like kind of fun having the limitation of the space. Like, I thought our Airbnb was quite beautiful, actually, even though it's kind of like shitty and cheap, but I liked it. And so I genuinely felt kind of inspired being in there, and I liked the way the light was hitting our paper thin walls, and I don't know. So I think it was like just a fun challenge, really, just coming up with what part of the room have we not seen before, and also starting off as sort of like, what is the action? I mean, really, that is how you should start it off, right? Like, is it natural for Zane to go from point A to point B as you're going to stay at point A? Like, is it natural? Like, do we feel these like urges inside of us to move or stay still? What part of the room are we gravitating towards for that scene? And then we would frame the shot from there.
Yeah, but I mean, in a larger sense, since you're in the scene, how do you control or do you not control the shots? And like also in your other film.
I would just have someone stand in, and then I would just move into the frame. Yeah.
So you would block it with somebody else.
Yeah, or just make sure it like didn't look crazy. But I think a lot is a little bit out of my control because once I'm acting, it's like I'm just gonna be moving naturally, and I'm sort of just at peace with the fact that the camera is picking up all of that, as opposed to like every moment and movement sort of being accounted for.
So you kind of release control once you're in the scene.
But also, you did something really cool, which is like that I never experienced, which is a lot of the shots were really stationary, and you were like, hey, if you walk out of the shot and come back in, like that's totally fine, which was really cool and freeing as an actor to not have to, stay within the frame so intensely and to have to think about that so much. That was really, really cool. Yeah.
One last question about portrayal of women, and then we'll open it up to everybody. I was very impressed in actual people how you had a whole sex scene like basically take place under the sheets. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely not giving the female body up for sexual consumption by the usual male gaze routine. In this film, also at the beginning, there was that, to my view, amazing scene in the shower where Zane is talking to you, and you're like completely hidden by the shower curtain. Mm-hmm. We know you're naked, but we're not seeing you, and the actor's also not looking at your body, he's talking to you. Mm-hmm. And then you come out and it stays like this. But later in the movie, we do see more bodies, and I'm just wondering about if you could just talk about that approach.
Yeah, I guess for me personally, I don't feel like precious about my body in some ways. Like as a performer, I guess, I'm sort of like fine seeing it. It's, again, like the shots are serving more, I guess, for me, the purpose of this storytelling. I think, it was important for me to show, full nudity because I wanted to show kind of how intimacy is weaponized. And I think to get to that point, it can be important to show vulnerability being weaponized fully.
You only show it between Adam and
Mm-hmm.
and the girl, right?
I'm naked. I mean, that was, I mean, well, so, I mean, for that scene, had to do a lot with also just staging it for one shot. But are you asking sort of why I showed Kristen the scene, the sex scene?
I'm not saying
Oh.
why, I'm just wondering if you could reflect on those choices.
Yeah, I mean, I think I wanted to do the whole fight scene between Zane and me, Zane and I, as a one shot. Because I wanted to show sort of the whole movement of anger into like kind of, you know, fucked up commiseration, co-conspirators to going into the sex scene. And for that to happen, there were just like certain sort of like ways that, you know, we had to frame things. And then for Kristen, I don't know, I thought it was just, I wanted it to feel shocking and sort of disturbing to see Adam weaponizing intimacy the way he did. And I wanted to show like all the kind of in-between moments, like the moments of consensual sex and the moments that are not as consensual and her fighting for sort of control. And it was an experience that, you know, those were experiences I had a lot when I was younger, like when I was like learning how to have sex and learning how to like be in control. Because I don't think at every moment in sex, young women are in control always, and that doesn't mean it's like assault in any ways, but it's like, I wanted to show this sort of messier process that is sort of not always seen. Yeah.
Any questions? Yeah, but in the back. I don't think we can hear you, or I can't.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Louder.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
First, congratulations on doing. I really liked it. I think the performances were really strong. Halfway through the film, I figured that probably it was not going to be any new scene outside of the house. So I was wondering, when did you decide that there was not going to be any scene outside of the house? If that was something you planned from the beginning. And also, I feel like the two male characters, they have a good contrast, moral-wise. Because first, you think that the Greek guy is more like a psychopath or a villain or something that is illegal morally. But then, when the film ends, it's more clear that the other guy is more of a good person, or at least the film kind of thinks that way. So, comment on that?
Yeah, sorry, did you say moral, that they had moral differences?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to repeat the question, the first one being, when did I know that it was going to be all shot in the Airbnb, or it was all going to take place in the Airbnb, and then also about the moral contrast between Adam and Ben. Well, so when I wrote the script and then I shot the script, there's a date scene between Kristen and Adam that's outside of the Airbnb. But it got cut for quite a few reasons. One being our DP actually got COVID on the last day when we were shooting the date scene, and so it was like, that was sort of like making everything out of whack, and there was sort of like, I mean, there was like so many sort of different variables already, and there wasn't like a lot of cohesion, and it just like wasn't working. Like within the narrative of the film, it just wasn't, it just felt like too much of an outlier. And yeah, I don't know, I think I was trying to go up against the like the theatrical contained element of the film, and it actually just wasn't working. I should just like lean into it. And in terms of the moral sort of divide between Ben and Adam, I don't know if there is as much of one, as opposed to when I was thinking about these two characters, you know, I think they're quite similar actually. Like they're both like, you know, white guys from, you know, who are educated, you know, attractive and tall, and it's just like that something, they were just, maybe it was nature versus nurture, I don't know, but just something made one of them feel really like closed off, like a clenched fist, inside of themselves, and the other one felt very free in ways that are good and bad. You know, I don't really like to think of anyone as a good or bad person. Obviously, it's a question posed in the film, but for me, it's like more interesting just to have characters who both can have moments of enlightenment and then moments of self-degradation and making mistakes and hurting other people. You know, I think Adam commits sort of the greatest moral wounding in the film just because he does seem to hurt someone else that he doesn't know very well. But it's interesting because I think the takeaway is that Ben is sort of the villain. I don't think anyone's a villain, but that's what people seem to take away from it. So I don't know, I think we're only seeing a weekend too, right? So we don't really know much more about them, and that's something I'm really interested in films, is just the fact that you see them for only a certain amount of time, and then that's all you get. And you get to use that maybe as an allegory for something you're interested in, or a moral conundrum you're fascinated with, but that's, you know, there's more to it in one's imagination. But I like the idea that we just see this contained moment in these people's lives, and sometimes you see the best moments, and sometimes, more oftentimes, you see the worst.
Congrats, Kit. It's really great seeing where you're at now. Can you hear me?
If you talk louder, it's better.
Okay. I just want to say congrats again, Kit. Like I do remember seeing the actual people and then seeing this and seeing the progression. And so there's two things. One, I wanted to speak to, as a filmmaker, what do you feel like your progression was from actual people to this closeness? And secondly, one of the things, and this also speaks to you as well, Zane, but like how well y'all did like the longer takes, and what was the experience and process for like crafting those scenes by doing the longer takes?
Thank you. Just to repeat the question for everyone, the first one was about progression from actual people to this, and then about how we shot the long takes. I mean, with actual people, I had really no money, and like friends as resources, really. So I think you see that within the film, but I think in a way that I still appreciate and I have a lot of sentimental value for. But I think when I was thinking about like my first film, I never really thought I was going to do like a coming of age movie. It was not really ever like a genre I was like super interested in throughout my like education. I wanted to do more things like this closeness, but you know, I really had such limited resources that I had to think about how can I just make a feature with what I have, and like coming of age story sort of like came to me from that. But I think, you know, I learned a lot. I think, a lot about how to talk to actors. I think talking to friends who are like just doing you a favor as an actor and having to clarify for them is like very helpful to make you realize how to talk to actors better as well. But you know, I think with this closeness we had a lot more resources, and that was just like such a gift. And I think I just want to continue being smart about how I take advantage of my resources whenever I have them. But I think like with actual people in this closeness, it was just working with what I had and not like it's like so annoying when someone's like, we had like $4 million more for this movie. We could have like gotten this song from Rihanna or whatever. And you're like, okay, but you didn't. So I don't know what to tell you. Like it's, you know, it's like, it's not like, I don't know, wishful thinking and filmmaking don't really go hand in hand, honestly. It's like, and this is a hard lesson, but a good lesson to just keep learning for my own mental health. And then, in terms of the long takes, well, I just realized that our intimacy coordinator, Adrian Cooper-Smith, is here, which is an intimacy coordinator, especially for the long takes for the scene between us and the scene between Adam and Kristen, was really like a tremendous gift, because intimacy coordinating is as much about figuring out how to make sex look real as it is about just like honestly choreography and like there are all these things that like you think you know about doing a sex scene because you're like, I have had sex, so like I know what to do, and it's like you kind of just don't, because like there's just like something that doesn't really always translate to the camera when you're just like winging it, and so you need like choreography and you need someone else watching to sort of make sure everything feels realistic. And there are like things that we weren't even thinking about for those scenes, but it was really helpful to have an intimacy coordinator. And there's a lot more tape than I ever imagined possible involved for everything, which is insane. But yeah, I think like, I think for the long takes too, it's just about trusting everyone else behind I knew what I wanted. I wanted long sustained takes. I didn't really care so much about, if we were always perfectly in frame, if every moment was like the most picturesque film still. I wanted it to feel natural. I wanted it to feel like the camera was a voyeur. And so it was just really helpful to have people behind the camera who I trusted and who were, saying, I think something really helpful to have people say is, this came across like this for me. So as opposed to being like, you need to like be angry in this scene, it was watching the scene and like Ani, our producer, for instance, would be like, well, this scene was amazing, would say, this scene came across to us like a tug of war or something. And then that's really helpful, because then that can be compared to sort of my optimum vision for what the scene was supposed to be. So it's just also trusting people behind the camera to give you like diligent sort of interpretations and notes about the scene. And then we would just go for it, essentially.
One last question, who's burning? Most burning? Back there, I know you were from the beginning.
So I feel like you.
Oh, hey, Scott. You actual people. Good to see you.
As far as like the acting side of it being one setting, a very distant setting, that created like challenges as far as like anticipating like the other actors or like chemistry between actors, like just as far as I guess being close and also trying to create that like surprise and suspense between like what could be great.
So question is, when we're working in such a kind of enclosed, contained environment, how did the actors continue to sort of surprise each other or create tension? It was really nice because it was like doing a play, because we would go back to the same set every day. And so there was this rhythm that started to develop between everyone that was really nice, and there was a lot of camaraderie. Ian, who plays Adam, would often just hide away in his room and like listen to music, and I don't know, really do God knows what. Like I don't really know. And so he maintained more of a distance from us at times. And I guess the big thing was that he would not reveal to us if he thought Lance was actually real or not. And so that was sort of the big tension secret on set that kept us all going.
Drove us crazy.
Yeah, it did drive us a little crazy, I think, because I don't know if Lance is real or not. That's not my job, believe it or not. I think that was the big thing. But also again, like, I'm sort of like, I like working with people who are nice and like vaguely normal, and so it's like I'm not going to work with some like insane like method actor. And I think a lot of those pretensions, mostly coming from men, can really hinder sort of like just the collaborative process on set. And so like, much in the same way as a play, like, you're going to set every day, and obviously when you're in character, you're like trying to surprise each other and, really listen and create, like interesting ways of interacting with the person, which makes them really like stay on their toes. But, when we're offset, we're also just like friends, and it's like being colleagues or coworkers, but in like the best office of all time, I guess. Yeah. So there were moments of like mystery But a lot of the time we were just sort of hanging out because that's the best part of being on set is like hanging out with people and having fun. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.